All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're about 5 after the hour. So again, my name is Katie Olson. I'm the Director of Operations and Services at the City Tech Collaborative. I'll be joined by my colleagues from the UN Uraía program. We'll walk through the webinar this morning. We'll take questions at the end, so please keep your microphones on mute and utilize the chat function to ask questions, which we'll collect and run through at the end. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded so we can post it for other listeners who might want to access the information at a later time. So let's dive in. I'll walk briefly through the agenda and then I'll introduce my co-presenters. So this morning, we'd like to introduce you to the City Tech Collaborative as well as the UN Uraía program. I'll be joined by my colleagues from the UN Uraía program. Following introductions, we'll walk briefly through the history and background of Uraía. We'll then walk through what the Chicago City Solutions series will be, the format and methodology of the two-day program, as well as how to participate to present. A reminder, if you've joined us, to please keep your microphones on mute. Thanks. Following the overview of the City Solution series, we will give some example projects that will be presented. We'll then conclude with questions and answers and have a bit of a discussion. So again, if there are any questions that emerge, please feel free to utilize the chat function, and we'll collect those questions and review them at the end. All right, well, let's dive in. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Gabriel, at the UN Uraía Platform to briefly introduce himself, as well as provide an introduction to his colleague, Diana Lopez.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Katie, and thanks for the invitation from City Tech to really put us the opportunity to be sharing with you guys today. So I'm Gabriel Barros, as Katie said, and I recently joined Uraía as the platform coordinator. So besides running the day-to-day activities of the network, I'm responsible for making sure that the knowledge that we share within the network can drive real impact to our members. And I have been working with urban development in smart cities for over 14 years, from a local and city perspective, but also from an international organization perspective and private sector. And I'm currently based in São Paulo, but of course, Uraía is a global program with member cities from all over the world. So also from UN Habitat, I want to acknowledge the presence of Diana Lopez. She will be joining us shortly, and she's the head of the local government and decentralization unit of the United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat.
Great, thank you, Gabrielle. And as I mentioned, I lead operations and services at City Tech Collaborative in Chicago. And along with the City of Chicago, we will be the co-host of the City Solution series this summer. My role is to lead partner operations, communications, and design new services with our consortia of academic, industry, and civic partners. I've been with the City Tech Collaborative for 4 years. Previous to that, I served in Mayor Manuel's office at World Vision Chicago, and then directly in the mayor's office as a fellow. My background is in urban and regional planning, and previous to that, I've done some work in the private sector, and particularly with the in the finance and nonprofit sector. So let's dive in. And as a reminder for those of you who have just joined us, please keep your microphones on mute so that we don't have any feedback, and utilize the chat function at the end to submit any questions. So I'll begin briefly with an overview of what City Tech is and why we're in a good position to partner with the UN Uraía program, as well as the City of Chicago to co-host this conference this summer for global cities. So the premise of City Tech is that cities face increasingly acute challenges and complex situations that are too great for any one entity to solve. Cities, as the world continues to urbanize, are faced by multidimensional challenges. That includes challenges to the built environment that have to do with climate, so flooding, heat waves, and other emergencies. Increased traffic, which not only delays commuter times, but also can lead to increased accidents or reduced air quality. There's also the strain and the demand to increase job opportunities, but also to create economic development in a way that doesn't displace vulnerable populations, but allows all to share in the growth of the city. We also acknowledge that within cities, there's a diversity of geographies. So there's residential areas, business areas, industrial areas, and we also want to preserve green spaces. Finally, there's a complexity of players within the city: residents, anchor institutions such as universities and hospitals, city government, tourists who visit the city, as well as businesses. So when we think about the city, we want to acknowledge the different players, the different geographies, and the challenges that bringing all of these players and geographies together in one place can create, as well as the opportunities that the combination of these assets can also afford. Traditionally, cities have often sought technology solutions for some of these problems, and they will address them on a pilot by pilot basis. So cities will work perhaps with a tech company to pilot a particular solution, sometimes without a good understanding of the root cause of the problem. Sometimes the solutions are somewhat limited, given that they're perhaps not addressing the core problem and perhaps aren't comprehensive enough to address the core issues. What we believe at City Tech, and we'll walk through some examples in a few moments, is that pilots need to first understand the work with the city and work with other players to first make sure that we're understanding the core of the problem, understanding the root cause of the issue before we bring technology to the solution. We also believe that the solutions have to be sustainable. There has to be a complementary business model that will, if the solution is successful, will allow the city to continue to utilize the solution and expand the solution so that it can reach all parts of the city. We also believe that in order to create the best solution possible, in addition to working closely with city government, we need to work with residents to make sure that, again, we're addressing the core of the issue, and that also we're planning for some of the consequences of implementing the technology. We also want to think about how the outcomes are inclusive. So again, thinking about how a solution, perhaps piloted in one area of the city, could be expanded beyond that one geography and touch not only an entire city, but perhaps scale to other cities. So City Tech Collaborative reinvents cities, first by transforming cities, in our case, the city of Chicago, into test beds for new ideas. We work with partners and people to remake essential services and infrastructure from seals to skyscrapers. We believe that it's important to design solutions that can start as a small pilot and then scale, not only to Chicago, but to the world. Finally, our vision is that cities are places where technology is the driver of opportunity, inclusion, engagement, and innovation for all. I'll walk briefly through the structure of our collaboration here at City Tech, as well as through our process. So my team at City Tech, which includes my colleague Denise Lynn Riedel, who many of you who come to participate in the UN series will have the pleasure of working with. We have a team of about 10 people, and we have a broad range of functional skills, from analytics to product development. Many of us are urban planners, and we also specialize in mobility, water, health, environment, and human services across our skill set. Our partners and funders include a broad range of corporate partners as well as civic partners. So you'll see names such as Accenture, ComEd, which is an Exelon company, HERE Technologies, MasterCard, Microsoft. Locally, the MacArthur Foundation, the Sprague Institute, and the McCormick Foundation are among a number of our partners that fund our work and also provide subject matter experts and funding for specific pilot opportunities. The way that we work is a four-part process. So we first get to the root of the problem in an opportunity discovery phase. So we bring together people, the city, industry, academia, around a particular topic, such as flooding or mapping or heat, deadly heat. And we make sure that we understand the core problem, but also its manifestations and the issues it causes. We then work together with a team of experts from that mix of industry, academia, and the public sector to define a potential pilot that we could run to test out a particular solution. We then implement the solution as a pilot in a specific area, in our case using the city of Chicago as a test bed. And then in phase 4, we think about how the solution can be scaled across Chicago, likely by our private sector partners, and then taken to cities around the world. The goal is to produce market-ready results that our partners can scale both locally, regionally, nationally, and finally globally. And we're excited with the opportunity to present some of these solutions to all of you, so that we have an opportunity to think about how some of the solutions already that we've created can be taken to your cities. So again, we pilot here in Chicago. We've also done some work in some of the cities that you'll notice on the map of the US. But increasingly, we've had interest from almost all of the cities that are called out here. We have a pilot that we're announcing in a couple of weeks with the City of London. So we're very keen to co-develop solutions in Chicago that we can run in parallel with other cities, but also that other cities can take and run on their own. So at this point, I will turn it over to Gabrielle to walk through the Uraía platform and how we got engaged with how City Tech Collaborative got engaged with Uraía.
Thanks, Katie. Can you pass to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Thanks. So for those who are new to Uraía, we are a joint partnership between UN Habitat, which is the United Nations agency that has the mandate to improve urban development worldwide, and FMDV, which is the Global Fund for Cities Development, which is also an alliance of local governments who are engaged on coming up with financing and economic development solutions to cities. And also the platform is supported by the Swedish Development Agency. But really, what exactly is Uraía? Next one, please. So we are a multi-stakeholder knowledge-based platform, and our aim is to support innovation in public management through focus on 3 main pillars. The first one is municipal finance. So how can cities utilize technology to increase local revenue? So we can, for example, investigate how cities can expand local taxation, tackle informality, or even improve legislation to improve their municipal finance. The second pillar would be to the management of public services and also infrastructure. So how can cities utilize those solutions, these new solutions, to foster efficiency in a series of services, like, for example, public lighting, water supply, or even waste management. And the third main pillar is transparency and accountability. So how can we ensure, through the use of ICT tools, that municipalities provide access to data, but also communication channels with the citizenship, and monitoring tools, so people can evaluate and monitor how the city is providing public services, but also accountability in their municipal finance. Next one, please. So besides this knowledge exchange, we also want to support cities accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations, and specifically the number 11, which is to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And we believe that ICT tools can unlock a series of opportunities for cities to tackle those goals. For example, reducing administrative costs, but also making accessible certain services that before were not accessible. And also, of course, to provide a platform and digital services for including the citizenship of those territories. So we strongly believe that ICT is essential infrastructure as we move forward in the urbanization and the sustainable urbanization. But we also believe that cities have a long learning curve to implement those solutions correctly and more effectively, specifically when we talk about the least developed countries. Next one, please. And also we know that cities that are embarking in this journey, they need to do it by joining forces. Joining forces with academia, with the private sector, go hand in hand with the innovation ecosystem, with the startups, also with different levels of governments. And we believe that CityTech, our host in this webinar, but also in our workshop in July, is a very, very good example on how cities are developing this multi-stakeholder ventures to first push forward the smart city agenda, but also to implement concrete projects in their local areas. So besides local governments, we also welcome the participation of several agencies and agencies willing to develop more sustainable cities. So between hub cities and partners, we have more than 100 institutions participating at Uraía. And what services that we offer to members? I'm going to detail that in the next slide. So the first one is our annual meeting, the Citizenship Series. So each year we are hosted by a local government and we tackle specific themes that the network has identified as crucial to their smart city agenda. So we have been hosted by Santander in Spain, Oslo, Nicosia, and Madrid. And we tackle topics such as, for example, PPPs for smart solutions. So how cities can model the public partnerships in order to implement more effectively smart city solutions, but also how technology can support a better municipal budget management. Our next meeting will be in May, in the end of May in Brussels, where we're going to discuss how cities are using data to provide better services, but also to foster economic development and also innovation within their territories. And the results of those meetings, we gather them in what we call the Uraía Guidelines, which is a set of public policy recommendations that we put forward to our members. Everything is available on our website if you wanted to access this content. And we also host a series of webinars like this one. So again, we are hosted by one member city or a member institution, and we tackle a specific problem or theme related to the use of technology in city management. And finally, we are a global platform and we provide several networking opportunities to our members to liaise not only within the network, but with external partners as well. And since we are talking about innovation, we realize that we also need to innovate on how we deliver the exchange of knowledge. And that's why we are partnering with CityTech. And if you could, Katie, pass to the next slide, please. So that's why we are partnering with CityTech and organizing also with the city of Chicago the first Chicago City Solutions. We will explain the specifics of the meeting as we move forward in the webinar, but the methodology that we have created was actually co-developed between CityTech and Uraía. And we believe that this is the next generation of how cities can learn between each other. And we are also putting the spotlight on the Chicago experience. So next slide, please. Just to finalize and pass the word to Katie, we have several ways to engage with us. We invite you to join us in Twitter, but also to access all the content that I just mentioned in our website. And you can feel free to contact us at the email that is shown on the screen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gabriel. We'll take questions again at the end via the chat function for Gabriel and the Uraía program specifically, but thank you for that great overview. So now I'd like to turn to the Chicago City Solutions overview and the partnership between CityTech, the City of Chicago, and the Uraía Platform, and what we'll be doing this summer and how you have an opportunity to participate. So as Gabriel mentioned, they host a number of global workshops around the world for cities to come and share best practices, particularly as they learn to implement ICT technology. So for the first time, the Uraía as well as the City of Chicago and CityTech are coming together to host a new conference that will be an in-depth examination of innovative projects in Chicago, with an emphasis on how these methodologies to implement these projects in Chicago can be applied by local governments who would like smart technologies to be part of their city. So the goal is to establish collaborative city pairs to partner after the conference takes place to assist each other with the implementation of new initiatives. And then finally, there will be a publication of the local Chicago cases that we present, along with a record of other cities' initiatives and lessons. So the themes that will be explored include infrastructure, mobility and transportation, emergency preparedness, and public health. So the conference will invite 80 to 100 representatives from cities across the world to share experiences and lessons across these 4 categories. We'll dive into a few examples of what we mean by each of these in subsequent slides. So how will the conference work? So as we mentioned, that we will be inviting 80 to 100 participants from cities around the world. And the conference will again focus on how cities can learn from the technology that Chicago has implemented, but there'll also be an opportunity for other cities to present their learnings in the 4 areas that I just mentioned as well. So the conference will have at least 4 core components. So first and foremost, a deep dive into Chicago technology cases. So the City of Chicago and CityTech will provide high-level overviews on the information and best practices about some of our flagship technology projects. We will be bringing in the practitioners of those projects. So we will have representatives from the City of Chicago, the various departments, such as the Department of Transportation, the Department of Water Management, the Department of Information and Technology. We'll also bring in some of our corporate partners, such as Microsoft and MasterCard, who have participated and led some of these projects. We'll also be bringing in some of our civic partners, as well as our academic partners, who can also speak to their role in creating these solutions in Chicago. We will also be taking, in addition to bringing the practitioners into the room with you, we'll also take you out to the site visits. Some of the case studies will be at universities, some will be in public areas, others will be others will be perhaps at some of our corporate partners as well. So we'll have a chance to actually take you out to visit these projects to see these projects in action and live in the city. As I mentioned, we'll also be asking for participation from the cities that are attending. We would like for other cities as well to present some of their ongoing or planned projects that align with the categories that I mentioned on the previous slide around infrastructure, public safety, water, and emergency management. In addition to the conference, where we'll walk through the case studies, the site visits, and the opportunity for other cities to share their best practices, we'll also have pre-conference and post-conference events. So those of you who arrive early will have an opportunity to network with one another as well as some of our partners. We'll also have an official welcome dinner, a gala dinner for all of you who are attending. And then finally, an opportunity for sort of a closing event where we'll be joined by leadership from the city of Chicago. So if you're interested in attending, and again, this opportunity is really geared towards city officials and those who'd be practitioners implementing the new technology in their cities. If you're interested in participating as a city official, you can first register to attend at this link. We'll share the slides around as well, so that you have the link to the site where you can register. There's also an opportunity, as I mentioned, for your city to present a city project or experience that would be showcased at our City Solution Series. So we are gathering experiences from other cities that have projects that are aligned, again, with our 4 category areas: infrastructure, mobility and transportation, emergency preparedness, and public health. Cities that submit a project will be eligible to speak at the City Solution Series. You'll be part of a panel discussion and have the opportunity to present your project. And the cities that we select for a speaking engagement will also be eligible to have their travel and accommodation supported with funding. So in addition to registering, if you would like to apply to submit an experience, you must submit a completed, ongoing, or city project at a form via a form that you can download. And again, we'll share out this link. Complete it and mail it in to the address info@uraía.org. Applications are due next week, May 13th, 2018. So again, we'll share around that link. So for those of you who are perhaps interested in submitting a project, I'd like to provide a few examples of the projects that we'll be sharing. Even if you're not interested in submitting a project topic, this might give you a sense of some of the projects that we'll cover, so you can help gauge of whether this conference will be of high value to you. So again, the 4 topic areas: infrastructure, mobility and transportation, emergency preparedness, and public health. Infrastructure includes projects that leverage open data, IoT, or predictive analytics to increase service performance. Mobility and transportation can be projects that reduce congestion, manage demand, or deploy alternative transportation modes. Finally, emergency preparedness addresses flooding, extreme heat, man-made disasters. And public health can also include air quality, water quality, or innovative ways to help inspect the city and from a sort of a regulatory perspective. So one example in the water space that we'll be presenting is one of our first projects that we undertook at the City Tech Collaborative, which is the Smart Green Infrastructure Monitoring Pilot. So the underlying technology here, because I think we want to acknowledge what the underlying architecture is the Internet of Things and how it can be applied to infrastructure in the built environment. So in this case, we took sensors, placed them in green infrastructure, which are treatments at the street level that can divert flooding from city streets. And we used the sensors to capture how much rainwater was actually being diverted using green infrastructure treatments. The city of Chicago had planned to install green infrastructure across the city, and prior to installing green infrastructure, we wanted to make sure that the city would be deploying the most effective green infrastructure for its location. So back to the theme of making smart investments, this is a great example of a project that helps a city be fiscally responsible with its investments and make the most of a planned deployment of technology with the goal of reducing flooding for the city of Chicago. The outcomes, we actually just released the outcomes yesterday. If you're interested, you can check those out on our website. But the pilot was 18 months, and the solution that we created ultimately was an IoT sensing package that other cities and the city of Chicago can deploy in green infrastructure to be able to monitor different types of green infrastructure performance over time. So the outcomes of the project include this novel approach to sensing the street using IoT and helping the city make responsible investments in green infrastructure over time. And ultimately, when you have data aggregated on different types of infrastructure, you can assess how the system is performing as a whole. So if green infrastructure is being monitored at 50 sites around the city, and you know that there's a certain level of rainwater that needs to be collected before it hits the city sewers to prevent overflow, you get a picture of how effective the city as a whole is at addressing flooding. Now I'd like to shift to a transportation and mobility example. This is another pilot example that we ran last year with MasterCard, the Chicago Transit Authority, Ideas 42, which is a behavioral economics firm, and Cineverse, which is a text messaging company. So the idea, the problem that we were trying to solve here is that at peak periods, so say during the rush hour when there's many commuters going to school and work, or special events such as a sports game or a concert, the transit system is overfilled, which results in longer travel times, frustrated riders, and sometimes safety concerns. The pilot that we created in the city of Chicago to address this issue was to ask. We first identified a pilot site, which was the Chicago Cubs, our baseball team. The transit line that goes past the stadium during baseball games experiences a high volume of both those attending the game as well as riders who are not going to the game, but going to and from work that passes the stadium. So the pilot that we created was a pilot to determine if we could actually shift some of the riders off of the transit system to off-peak times. So if the game was between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the evening, we looked at finding ways to encourage riders to ride the train either before that time or after that time. So we ran the pilot 3 times. The first time we encouraged we simply told the riders that there is a game and encouraged them by a text message to ride at a different time. The second time we made a donation to charity if they rode at a different time. The third time we reimbursed them, so we gave them a free ride if they took the train at a different time. Riders, the way that we identified riders is they are connected via a MasterCard that they tap onto the CTA console to get in and out of the system. So we were able to send text messages to those riders that signed up for the program, and then we knew if they adhered to the behavior change anonymously based on the volume of the MasterCard transactions that were happening at those stations. The result was successful. Using a couple of the behavioral incentives, we were able to reduce transit ridership by 17.5% during peak periods, which is proof that that demand management tools, including behavior change, can be used to reduce congestion impact. And the game was a fun example, but if we think about how we can apply this across the city of Chicago system, there's a real opportunity to help commuters who are coming to work, picking up their children from childcare, how we can help them get to their location more efficiently by alerting them when there's going to be congestion and routing them to a more efficient route, perhaps at a different time or perhaps on a different method of transportation. So at this point, I wanted to, we'll check for some questions from the audience. I'll check if we have any questions from the group.
Yeah, Katie, I just wanted to compliment something regarding your presentation, and just to express that those experiences are amazing, and the results that you're having are incredible. But just to the audience, I just want to make sure that the message is conveyed correctly. So if your city or project does not have the same level of impact of the projects from Chicago, I still encourage you to present those projects, because we are looking not only for the best worldwide cases, but also for cases from learning cities that are willing to learn from Chicago, but also from other cities on how to go into this journey of implementing smart city projects.
That's a great point. We encourage cities around the world to think about coming, even if they are not at this stage of technology development. The goal of our work here is to bring solutions to cities around the world, regardless of the stage of development that they're in. So that's a great point. Well, if there are no questions, we'll flip back to our presentation here. And I think that there's a few ways that we can that you can get involved. As I said, we'll share these slides with the group, and we'll also post the feed of the presentation this morning. So one way to get involved with City Tech specifically is to join our LinkedIn group, and we have the link provided there. You can search us on LinkedIn. In addition to posting about our partnership with Uraía, we also post information about our pilot results and our partners and some of the conferences and speaking opportunities that we're part of. You can also subscribe to our mailing list if you're interested in participating in future webinars. So we host this webinar. Quarterly for cities around the world. This quarter, the Q2 quarter, this was our focus, presenting the Uraía opportunity together with the UN. But we also host this webinar pretty frequently on a quarterly basis to provide information to other cities about how they can get involved in upcoming projects. As I mentioned, we're working with the City of London on a project now, and we're always interested in doing sort of cross-city pilots and working on cross-city solutions. So we share opportunities on a quarterly basis for cities to become involved with those things. So if you subscribe to our mailing list, we can provide you more information about how to get involved there and to work on projects with us together. As I mentioned, the registration for the Chicago City Solution Series is now open, and the link is below. So as Gabrielle said, regardless of what stage you are in terms of technology implementation and deployment, we welcome you, we encourage you to apply, to come and be a learning city, to learn from the city of Chicago as well as other cities what the best technologies are and how to implement them. If you are interested in perhaps submitting a city experience and being a speaker at the Chicago City Solution Series, you can find the form at that link there. So again, you'll complete the form and mail it in to info@uraía.org. We'll share all these links around again to make sure that you have all of that information. So unless there are final questions, we will conclude a bit early. We want to thank you all for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure to speak with all of you, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a number of those of you on the call this morning who choose to apply for the conference, whether you come as a learning city or whether you choose to present. The city of Chicago has a lot to teach this morning. It has a lot to teach, and we would very much welcome the opportunity. I am seeing one question here, so before we go, the question is, as a college student coming from a smaller city, I'm currently working with some local leaders in government, industry, and academia to create a similar ecosystem as the model of City Tech. What advice do you have for smaller, medium-sized cities? I think that's a great question, and we'd be happy to follow up with you on that particular topic. At the City Solution Series this summer, in addition to speaking about the specific technology projects, we'll also be acknowledging the role that having a public-private partnership like City Tech in the city of Chicago, the role that we play as a neutral entity in bringing public-private partners together. So to answer the question, we'll cover a lot of that in the sort of necessary ecosystem at the City Solution Series in July. But I will say that I'd encourage you to check out our model and to follow up with us offline about how over the past 4 years we've put together a consortium of academic partners, industry partners, the City of Chicago, as well as ourselves as sort of neutral experts to design technology outside of the city of government, but using the city of Chicago as a test bed. So my advice for smaller and medium-sized cities is really the same. I think the consortia that is a cross-sector consortia is critical and doesn't is sort of size is sort of irrelevant. But we will cover a lot of that information in July, and I'd be happy to follow up offline as well with how the consortium developed. Great question. Anything else before we conclude? All right. Well, we'll conclude this morning, and again, as a follow-up, what role do volunteer groups like Code for America or Try Hack Night play in this? That is a great question. Thank you again, Mike. So for those of you who may not be familiar with these groups, Code for America is a civic organization that focuses on how coding can be used for civic good. And likewise, Shy Hack Night is a group in Chicago that meets every Tuesday to look at the role of new technology development, specifically either software development or coding can be utilized to address civic problems. So the way that it typically works is that there's a presenter from an outside organization who, perhaps someone who's addressing the criminal justice system, someone who's addressing flooding in the city of Chicago. They present the problem, they present interesting data sets that are associated with those problems and could be useful in addressing the problems. And then the group that gathers is a collection of people who are just generally interested, some who are coders, some who are software developers. And the idea is that by having the problem and some of the data presented to this group, they're in a position to perhaps utilize the data and think about the problem to come up with new solutions. So your question is a good one. We'll actually have an opportunity for participants who come to the July event. The July event is on a Wednesday. So for those of you who are here early, you'd be invited to come and witness one of the Chai Hack Nights on the Tuesday before the event. So that's certainly an option. So in terms of how Code and Hack Night will be involved in the event, there will be an opportunity for those of you who come early on Tuesday to participate. How these groups interact with our consortium specifically, it's a two-way exchange of information. We've presented at Hack Night several times. We brought most recently we brought the first project I mentioned, our Green Infrastructure Monitoring Project. We brought the data sets to the group and presented some of the flooding challenges that we've seen and the reason we decided to address it in the city of Chicago to the group. And there are a number of civic organizations that are continuing to dig into the data set and thinking about the data that we've produced from the Green Infrastructure pilot, how that can be utilized in other ways to address to create alternative flooding solutions. Other questions? Okay, great. Well, we will share around the slides with everyone so that you have information on both how to apply as well as how to submit an experience if you'd like. Our contact information will also be on there. So if you'd like to follow up with Gabrielle directly or with myself or with my colleague Denise Riedel, who is spearheading a lot of the planning for this event, we'll have our contact information on there as well. So thank you everyone for your time this morning. Many thanks to Gabrielle for co-presenting and sharing with us. Of course, of course. We look forward to hopefully seeing many of you in July.